We can submit that and we can move on to the next question. The next question says that the production possibilities frontier depicted in the diagram to the right illustrates 1. The likely result of a ground war. 2. Both the labor force and capital stock increasing. 3. Technological advances in the tank industry. Or 4. Both the labor force and capital stock decreasing. And so what we're seeing here is that we have a PPF with tanks on the y-axis, automobiles on the x-axis. You can either produce tanks or automobiles. Those are the only two types of goods you can produce. Our PPC tells us the possible production bundles we could access based on the resources that we have. And we see that PPC production possibility frontier, I'm not sure what C, I would call it PPF. The PPF expands outwards for both tanks and automobiles so that you have a larger frontier, right? So what is going to happen? What is going to be the reasoning for that happening? So 1 says the likely result of a ground war. I think what they're referring to here is the idea that when World War II happened, the United States was able to massively step up its production of tanks and automobiles. However, the overall increase in production of tanks and automobiles was partially a result of moving production away from other types of production and orienting it specifically towards goods like tanks and automobiles. In the case of a PPF, we assume that there are only 2 types of goods in the economy, tanks and automobiles. And second, it's unclear whether a ground war would increase the natural resources or the labor force or the technology required so that you could physically produce more tanks and automobiles than you could before. So I'm not so sure a ground war is the best answer here. Number 2 says that both the labor force and capital stock increased. And so we know that labor force and capital stock are both types of resources that are used to produce goods. And so if you increase the labor force or you increase the capital stock, either way, you would increase the ability to produce both these goods, tanks and automobiles. So that seems to be a good answer. 3 says technological advances in the tank industry. And so if we restrict technological advances to the tank industry, we wouldn't see a shape of PPF that looks like this. We would see that in our current PPF that we are both capable of producing more tanks and capable of producing more automobiles. A technological advance in the tank industry would simply imply that we would be able to better produce tanks, but not better produce automobiles. It would probably look something like this. Tanks, automobiles, we have our old PPF, and it would look something like this. It's bad. Something like that, where you could produce more tanks, but the automobile production that you wanted to do, if you wanted to spend all of your resources on the automobiles, you would produce the exact same as before. So it's not going to be 3. And finally, both the labor force and capital stock decreasing, we would see an inward shift, not an outward shift of the PPF if that happened. So it looks like 2 is the best answer here. I do want to clarify that I don't think that you need both. Like, you could have just an increase in the labor force, and you would see a shift to the right for the PPF. And you could have just an increase in capital stock, and you could still see a shift in the right of the PPF. You don't need to see both in order to see what's on this diagram happening. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. So they also picked 2, both the labor force and capital stock increasing. They said that a PPF is a locus of all possible combinations of 2 goods or 2 baskets of goods an economy can produce when all its resources are optimally and efficiently utilized at the given level of technology. If an economy is operating on its PPC or PPF, it means that all resources in the economy are fully employed. A rightward shift in the PPF, it's curved. Production possibility is curved. It illustrates an increase in the productive capacity of the economy that allows it to produce a greater quantity of both the goods. It can be achieved when there is an increase in the labor as well as the capital stock of the economy. So yeah, that's a good answer. I'm glad that they didn't say that you needed both, that it can be achieved by either an increase in labor as well as capital stock. Good answer. You can mark that as correct.